I want to take a moment to introduce Michael, and then I'm going to ask him to share some opening remarks, and then we can start with some questions. And this hour, I hope you all are going to learn from the best. But just a few things. Michael has been on the stage with the biggest names in the business, and President Bush, Tony Robbins, Barbara Cochran. His book has been endorsed by Dave Ramsey, 7L, and has been instrumental in, I know, a lot of Georgians, as well as people throughout the world building their business. And it has for me personally. Michael is a real estate agent at heart because in his third year of real estate, he closed 187 transactions, totaling over $40 million. Then he proceeded to get 500 referrals, which we would all like, over the next 8 years, every year, and consistently netted over $1 million. So I want to welcome Michael. And I call him friend. We got to know each other by sponsoring his Gen group. And Michael, thank you for joining us. And the other person that is going to be hosting and taking over pretty much from here is my wonderful law partner, Doug Dean, of 12 years, and best friend from 25 years. And now I get to be a fly on the wall and just learn like the rest of us.
Well, thank you for having me on, Richard. I appreciate it. As you know, Schaeferts and Dean are one of my favorites, and any way I can help, please let me know. I'm looking forward to this today. There's a lot of observations I've made this year, and it's been quite amazing.
Do you have any other remarks before we do jump into the questions, or do you want to just start knocking out questions for everybody?
Well, I think the first thing is that, if there's such a thing as like a fear quotient, I believe that agents should really have a fear quotient of about a 1 on a scale of 0 to 10 right now, as far as doing their job. That's kind of the right now. I will tell you that what the pandemic truly proved is that the generosity generation is here, and it is here to stay, and it is the preferred method of doing business for not just realtors, but lenders, financial planners, insurance agents, and even all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. That it is now that, like, we killed the sales person. We have literally seen the birth or the maturation of the service person. And this is not a way of doing business. This is a lifestyle. It is the generosity lifestyle. And truly, the generosity lifestyle leads to prosperity. So I guess that's my opening remarks.
Michael, that's great remarks. And we are pleased to have been working with Michael for a number of years, back from an earlier monthly marketing event. And I'm a closing attorney, not a real estate agent, but so much of what Michael talks about is really just applicable to life, and that's why I'm always inspired hearing Michael.
We are reacting to COVID-19 and how COVID-19 is impacting your business, and I think folks can learn how to still maintain a successful business even in an environment like this.
I think most of the people in the generosity generation who were implementing 7L saw their business actually go up during the COVID-19 time. So, I mean, I literally have people that were implementing the 7L system who didn't change anything. They literally did not change how they did generosity generation instead of lead generation. They still did their calls to their database, and they still did their text messages to their database, and they got more referrals than ever before because so many realtors we're jumping off the cliff, the COVID cliff. And so what's interesting is they kept doing what they were doing before. It's just the conversation changed a little bit. Nobody in the 7L system or the generosity generation had to pivot. They didn't have to pivot. They had to tweak, 1 degree tweak, a little bit of what they did with showings. They had to tweak a little bit what they did with listing presentations to do a little bit more virtual. And they had to do a lot more conversation around educating the buyers and sellers on how business works. Business never shut down. Realtors shut down. Business never shut down. There were still homes being sold. There were homes still being bought. And the thing about it is there were people still doing business, and they were still executing on the plan. It's how they did the business changed a little bit, and the conversation changed a little bit. What is amazing is that if you'll run the 7L system, you'll never have to change how you do business, because the conversation will just change. So instead of, like we were, going through, everybody was doing invitations to events. Everybody was doing this kind of thing in January and February, and it was all going great. People had their events the second week of March, and they had these, and then, March 17th, we get stay-at-home orders and that kind of thing. So what happened is, instead of calling to invite people to live events or calling people to just have these conversations about their plans for the year, this thing is now the conversation was, are you guys healthy? Are you guys safe? How are you reacting? The calls are awesome because there's a reason for the call. Like right now, everybody that's on this call should be calling the people in their database and just saying, are you back to work? How are things going? Did you come out of it okay? Because all the signs are super positive right now. The best time to talk to people is when they're positive. Now, the tougher calls were early in the stay-at-home orders, where you had to call and say, hey, listen, how are you guys doing? We don't know, what the future holds. But the thing is we know that, people need to stay home. And guess what? People answered the phone more than they ever did before. The conversations were happier and more glad than ever before. People were so happy to hear from someone, anyone. And in this case, it was their realtor. It was their realtor friend. Relationships went from 5s and 6s on a scale of 1 to 10 to 7, 8, 9, and 10 during the COVID, and you still have a chance to do it. The worst time to call someone in your database is right after someone a competitor calls them, right? So that's the fear that you need to live with. The fear is real, that one of your competitors could be calling your friend, your past client, someone from your neighborhood instead of you. So don't let that happen. When your competitor calls, your friend, your neighbor, your past client needs to say, you know what, thank you so much for calling, but you know what, Michael Maher's my realtor.
The only other question I'm going to ask, and then hopefully there's going to be a plethora of questions, because you guys have the preeminent referral guru, whatever you want to call him, on this call, and he's volunteered to answer your questions. But what are you recommending when you get to the top of the pyramid for that one-to-one meeting that can really solidify the relationship? Because clearly that had to change a little bit, right?
Well, we did a lot more phone calls, period, right? So the way to move a phone call up a pyramid is to do a FaceTime call. But you almost didn't need to. It's one of those where just by making the call, you are raising that relationship. You want a differentiation point, right? I've always said that the most preferred professional in a community is the most generous professional in a community. Everybody wants to be the most professional or the most preferred professional in their neighborhood or in their sphere. And I've always said, hey, listen, the way to do that is to be the most generous. Be known as the most generous And guess what? People will refer you because of your generosity. Well, I will tell you what we've seen is the most referred professional is the most communicative professional, the one who communicates the most. You know, that's the thing that we did as a company, ReferCo, is we were doing a weekly podcast show called Referrals Podcast. We were number 100 in the world in marketing. And, you know, we were doing this weekly. Well, as soon as the stay-at-home orders came up, it was like, okay, team, we got to go to daily. And we created the Daily Dose, which was literally a daily podcast with some of the most influential people in the world, like Todd Duncan, Nick Santonastasso, Sean Callagy, Bob Berg, the Go-Giver. And we literally every single day did a 1-hour podcast on positivity and productivity to keep people moving forward, to keep people, you know, focused on the positive and the productive. So that was our zig, was to communicate more. When people are fearful, the leaders have to communicate more. So we were saying, listen, you need to create a Facebook group for your community, and you need to lead that group. And then the other thing that we were really harping on is you need to do the 5-star. And the 5-star strategy is 5 steps to attract referrals. What are the 5 steps to attracting referrals? Identify the most positive, energetic, or people who are already referring you. Identify is the first step. The second step is to call them. Yes, pick up the phone. The third step is to fill out the VIP form. And the VIP form is just their birthdays, their kids' birthdays, their kids' names. Like, it's just an info sheet that you're going to put into your CRM database, or you can keep it on paper. The fourth step is to write them a handwritten note. You're going to follow up with a power note. The fifth step is you are going to invite them to your Facebook group. And that is how you grow your Facebook group, but that is also how you grow your referral network. And that's what people were doing during the quarantine times. Our goal was to get 150 VIP sheets filled out and 150 people invited to their Facebook groups. And Richard, Doug, I have to tell you, we have people who have 50,000 people in their Facebook group. We have people who have 7,400 people in their Facebook group. We have people with over 5,000 people in their Facebook group that all of them created the Facebook group like on March 17th or March 27th. And now they have thousands in their Facebook group as it grew and mushroomed based on generosity and helping their community. So, you know, the big thing is communicate more. That's how we zigged. And by the way, we also created a Facebook group that I'd love to invite the people on this call to. Is you can get to it just by typing in joingengen.com. That's joingengen.com. Joingengen.com, and you will be connected to our Facebook group, and you're welcome to join. We'd love to have you.
Michael, thank you. Rich, are we ready to open the floor for questions, or do we have anything additional?
I would love to hear their questions. If they have questions, I would love to answer. That's going to be the best. Like, how can I deliver the most value? And I think my question to everybody that's listening is, you know, how do you make this call the biggest win for you? If you're just here to like observe and spectate, then, you know, I'm not going to probably be able to help you because I'm not very entertaining and I'm not very funny. But if you are here to learn, you know, raise your hand, hit 5-star, and ask a question about getting more referrals or communicating during the quarantine times.
Michael, thank you. We've got a couple of folks with their hands raised, so I'm going to Peter Pasternak. If you'll, I'm going to unmute you. If you'll introduce yourself and ask a question, go ahead, Peter.
Peter Pasternak, Real Estate Connections. First of all, let me just say this. I mentor between 40 and 50 people, and the thing I make them do is they want me to mentor them. after the first time is they've got to read The 7 Loves of Communication. I say that all the time. It's the best book on networking. And so you start to say something, Richard, I'm going to expand a little bit. So my favorite part in that book is the pyramid, which really gives, for if you're not familiar, the least effective to the most effective forms of communication. So number one is, of course, your one-on-one, which, and number two is networking. So like when I go to a networking event, for me, my purpose is not to go and sell something or throw up on people, but use that as an impetus to then talk to people and move them to the one-on-one. So I've got two questions for you, Michael. First, with a lot of the networking events down right now, and like what are some of the things that you would recommend kind of in lieu of? And the second question is a question that I've gotten, and I'd love to hear your take, and that's this. They say, Peter, look, we all know the importance of databases, but it's one thing if you're using that to, like, the people are in there, but how do you, in this environment, go and try to get new business if you don't have the relationship?
Yeah, thank you. Those are great questions. So number one on the networking, and by the way, 7L may be the best book on networking for now until you write yours. So I just want to throw that out there for you. So you're a master networker. So I think the one thing is that there really is no substitute for live events. There just is, and I think that's the thing that some people were hoping is that, oh, wow, we can just go online with everything and it's going to be fine. But then they found out it's like, oh, wait, no, I really do crave the energy of live events. So, keep on doing what you're doing. And I would hope that everybody would tap into your network with real estate connections. And it's far more than just real estate connections. It's Atlanta connections. The biggest thing is I went one-on-one with all my networking. So I will tell you that I talked to all the sponsors who have sponsored my events over the years in one way or another. Like this call was basically was born during a communication that we did by email with Richard and Doug, mostly Richard. And so it's one of those where the networking is really going to be focused on one-on-one. And isn't that great? Because when do we ever have the time to truly develop those one-on-one relationships from all the gatherings? So I had a chance to call so many people, and they answered, and we actually had real conversations, so it goes back up to that, the phone call level of it. But Peter, another thing that we did that I really felt like was a good idea is we did virtual happy hours. So we would just get on Zoom, and some of them were alcohol related, and some of them did not involve alcohol. But we had some that were truly happy hours, and we would have drinking games, and we would have conversations about whatever. And then we had a trivia night. So we had like 30 trivia questions that people had to guess. And then we had a guest speaker on a networking night and did it kind of like this. The only difference is that instead of a conference call, we did it through the Zoom platform. So you can still gather people, and you can still have the leverage. You look at the pyramid. Advertising is the worst way to communicate. Direct mail is not very good either. Email or electronic communication is not a great way to communicate either because of the miscommunication and misunderstandings that can happen through that. Handwritten notes went up during the pandemic. Phone calls, which is the third level, from the top, the phone calls went up, and I truly believe that was the difference maker during now. And then you've got events and seminars, which is the second highest level, and that's a lot of times live, but it can be virtual. And then the one-on-ones are at the very top, and hopefully the one-on-ones are live if possible, because there is an energy and a focus. So what did we do during quarantine? is we raised our one-on-one video calls, so that most of those were through Zoom. And we raised what we did through Zoom as far as gathering people. So we did virtual events rather than live events, but honestly, the virtual events are only to continue the relationship with the thought of a future live event. What was the second question again? I apologize.
The second question was a question I get asked quite a bit, and I wanted your take on it, was, Peter, I understand a database. It's something if you know the people. But for some of the marketing people who are in sales, how do you reach out to people who, let's say, as you're trying to increase your business, that maybe you do not have the relationship with yet?
Yeah. So I wouldn't. Right. So that's now this is where viewer discretion is advised, right? What I'm about to say is not what Peter Pasnak may recommend or Richard or Douglas may recommend, but my thought is the only way you should never talk to strangers, like your mama said, right? Don't talk to strangers. And so what does that mean? So we're going to utilize the relationships we have to be introduced to relationships they have. So we're going to utilize, straight out of 7L, the triangle of trust. So the only way that I meet people is by being introduced to that person by another person. So I would not go directly to a stranger. I would go, okay, who knows that person that I want to go to? And I would go to the person first, and then they would introduce me to the other person. And that's the whole basis of a referral. Before, I only had time to really communicate with 150 people. That's all I had. So it was like this base of 150 people at the top. Well, what COVID did and what the quarantine time did is that actually allowed me to grow that to another 150 to 200 people that I could talk to. So I think that the biggest thing on this is that we're really talking about the inward rule from 7L, which is we will grow our database from within. We will grow our database from people we know. So I'm going to let's say I know 150 people. If I call each of them and they introduce me to one other person, then I'm already at 300. If those people introduce me to one other person, then I'm already at 600. And I'm a big believer in that, of the introduction, is that, I truly believe it's time to, quit marketing to strangers, and it's time to start attracting friends. I really believe that. It's time to start communicating with friends. If you communicate with your friends in a proper way, you'll never have to spend another marketing dollar or another advertising dollar. That's my belief, and, it's worked very well for our businesses. But, you've got to be the judge for your business. Like, if I'm a lender, you don't need to run ads. Like, there's so many realtors out there that when you build a relationship with them, they're going to be, Peter, you're a great example of this. You've got an army of 500 people a month who brag about you, and as long as they know what you do, then it's going to burgeon and grow your business, So that's kind of my first blush answer. I will tell you, the cold callers, the door knockers, the people who market to strangers and use sales pitches to try to grow their business, they were out of business. They had to, you know what they had to do? They had to do this relationship selling, this relationship type of business. And it was amazing that we saw some of them convert, and they found that they liked it. They found that they could do it, and they found that it was actually more productive than cold calling expireds or cold calling FSBOs or cold calling in general. They actually found that they got more business by going to this methodology of calling the people they know. So I think the big thing, if I'm Peter Pasternak, to go direct with you have a list of attendees of people who have been, starting with the most influential and the people who have helped you grow, starting just calling them. And then, like as time goes on, you're like, oh my gosh, I've got more time, maybe, and I'm going to call this 25 attendees. And then it's like, oh, I've got more time. I'm going to call this 25 attendees. And you work through your 500, 700. You probably had, 5,000 people through Real Estate Connections. Is I'd go through 25 at a time, starting with the most influential, most connected, or your biggest ambassadors. And I would just call through the list as far as you can go, and you may be surprised at how far you can go.
So one thing that I've noticed is I think people, if they didn't get this before, they get it now. And I talk about it all the time, is the value of relationships and the importance to nurture your relationships. Because, how are you going to develop a relationship with somebody like when things are bad and you haven't made contact? It looks kind of cheesy right now. And so I would say if you don't value relationships are long-term. I think a lot of people don't do them because it does take time. Nothing in life I know is worth it if it's quick. And so if something happens to you quick, it's a transaction, not a relationship. And so I think that during this time it's become abundantly clear to people the difference between relationships and, doing business another way.
Yeah, transactional. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And it is one of those where it's like a rocket. It's like it does take more energy in the beginning. Like a rocket uses 80 to 90% of its fuel on liftoff. And that's exactly how it is with a relationship. Pour into people right from the beginning, before they've even given you anything. Pour into them and try to give massive value and try to make that win the biggest win for them. And what happens is from there, it's just these 1 degree tweak course corrections like the rocket going to the moon. The rocket was off alignment like 98% of the time on the way to the moon. But what was it? It was all these little course corrections along the way, and it didn't take any energy or very little energy or fuel to make those course corrections. Why? Because they used all the fuel in the beginning, and they had the rocket pointed in the right direction and the right place, and they had the right plan. So it's one of those where it does take energy up front, and people are like, well, I don't want to spend that energy up front. Well, what if you knew that person was worth 20 to 40 referrals a year? What if you knew that? Then you would pour in. Okay, so here's the thing. Pour into it, because there are going to be certain relationships that you find that are going to be worth 20 to 40 a year. So anyway, selling something takes a lot of energy too. Why? Because the trust building phase. You've got to spend all this energy building trust. Rather, if it's an introduction, connection, or referral, you actually spend the energy giving value. You don't have to sell anything.
Next up, I've got a question from Rosalind with a phone number ending in 5169. I'm going to unmute you, and if you'll just tell us your name and who you're with, and throw a question out for Michael. Go ahead, Rosalind.
Good morning, everyone. This is Rosalind, Guardian Realty Group. Hey, Peter. Nice to hear you.
I'm sorry, I've got Peter muted. I just
unmuted no worries.
People as they put questions.
No worries. I know Peter. So my question kind of piggybacks on Peter's question. Michael, are you creating some sort of schedule to make these calls happen? Because what I'm finding is it's kind of hard to stay focused. It's like when I start some calls and then those calls morph into questions about property. Now I'm looking at MLSs, which takes me to emails, and then it's like I'm all over the place. So do you kind of have a schedule to stay focused when you're making 200-300 calls?
Well, no, I'm not making 200 or 300 calls at the same time, right? So that's the first thing. So I'm making one call at a time, first of all. The second thing is yes, I do have a schedule for this. And, from 7L, I talk about time blocking and blocking off your time. So the way that I've always done it is that I had a list of 10 people that I wanted to call first in the morning. So at 9 o'clock in the morning, I would do what I call the first and 10. And the first and 10 is 10 calls first thing in the morning. And when I say first thing in the morning, I mean, like, it's like this is one of the first things I do after my morning ritual. I have a morning ritual, and then I have an office ritual, which is what I do as soon as I get to the office. And then I do the first and 10, which is 10 calls before. And I will tell you that, like, I have a Smart Restart Summit. We're calling it Gen 2020. That is coming up July 10th, and this is a one-day summit where we are outlining exactly what to do in the second half of the year to do a year's worth of business in 6 months. So that's what we're showing people how to do at the Smart Restart Summit. Well, we have sponsors and partners who we are partnering with on the Smart Restart. So yesterday morning, my job was to contact people who had sponsored events in the past from a national level, because this is a national level event. And I made those calls yesterday morning. I had a list. I had their numbers. I made the calls. And now, we have 3 sponsors already for our event, in one day. So it's one of those where first and 10. And then right after the first and 10, I always did my generosity generation. And generation instead of lead generation. So my database would pop up the 10 to 15 people from my database who I needed to call that were, just these regularly scheduled monthly or quarterly calls. And it pops up. I've got 15 people, and I just go through the calls. And so I only make 20, 25 calls in a couple of hours, but they're the right people at the right time, and it keeps me on pace. Sometimes my generosity generation will go 90 minutes, but most of the time I can get that done in 60 minutes, and hopefully that helps. One of the calls I always do is the day before the birthday call, and that's interesting because today is the day before my birthday. Isn't that kind of funny? The day before birthday call sounds a little bit like this is, so it's Rosalind. So if, let's say tomorrow was your birthday, I'd say, hey, Rosalind, this is Michael J Maher with the Maher team. Hey, I understand that you have a very special day coming tomorrow. And unfortunately, I'm going to be busy and I've got appointments throughout the day tomorrow. But I have to tell you that I couldn't let your special day come and go without the happiest birthday ever. I hope you have an awesome day tomorrow. I hope you have an awesome week. And I hope this next year is your best year ever. And I'm just humbled and honored and privileged to be a part of it in some small way. And I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Happy birthday. Have a great one, Rosalind. We'll talk to you soon. Click.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. That sounds, now that's kind of part 2 of my question is, how do you feel about pre-recording calls and leaving those on people's voicemails?
I'm not a fan of it.
Not a fan of those. Okay.
No, like a slide broadcast? Look, anytime.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about it? Like when you get one?
For me, I typically delete them.
yeah. You don't listen to them, you delete them.
them.
They're a nuisance. They're interruptive. They're distractive. You're going to get a lot of them between now and November 4th, right? So the thing is that, I mean, this is why the do not call list was invented, is so that you didn't get calls that you didn't want, So the thing is that, listen, you got to strike the bulk and mass words from our language. If it is bulk, it will not work. If it is mass, it will not work. If you're after everybody, you will get nobody. The new consumer wants personalized and customized. That's why Amazon is taking over the world. You get emails that say you might like this, and you're like, yeah, you know what, I kind of do like this. Why? Because Amazon knows what you bought previously. They personalize and customize the email directly to you. So, the fact of the matter is that we got to make these calls one at a time. And the other part of the fact of the matter is that they are more effective sooner now than they ever have been. So you're going to get more sales by making 10 calls than you are doing 10,000 recorded calls. And that is so counterintuitive, or actually I would say counter-traditional, but it is the truth. It is the way of the people right now, is that, they don't want automated. They don't want automated emails. You don't want automated emails. Nobody wants automated emails. Nobody. What we want, we want real communication. Real communication. We want to talk to somebody. We want somebody to hear us, and we want somebody to help us. We no longer want somebody to find us and sell us. We want somebody to hear us and somebody to help us.
Michael, what's the most important thing that people should be doing right now?
Yeah.
In other words, when people hang up, what do you want them to start doing right now?
Well, interestingly enough, it's in the very beginning, I said, mess or success? What do you want during the quarantine times? And I did an acronym for success. And the success acronym is structure. You need to go to bed at the same time. You need to wake up at the same time. By the way, that advice works forever, right? You need structure. You need time. No, I'm not saying confined or constrained. I'm talking about freeing structure that actually gives you freedom. Time blocking things gives you freedom to not worry about things. If you put an appointment on your calendar, you don't worry about it. Gosh, I got to remember that appointment with that client. I got to remember that client. No, you don't have to remember it at all. Why? Because technology will remember that for you. And the power of rituals has come up over and over and over again. The morning ritual, I wrote The Miracle Morning for Real Estate Agents with Hal Elrod, and the power of the morning ritual and how important that was. And the nightly ritual and the Sunday night ritual. We're teaching a course starting next Monday called Sweet Dreams. And Sweet Dreams is a set of acronyms for the Sunday night ritual and the nightly ritual, where we are actually teaching night owls and early birds how to be more effective, more efficient, and more productive. How to not only get more sales, but how do you get more out of life? And that has been so amazing to see people add this structure. If you ask me what's the number one thing that successful people do, is they sleep well. That's the number one thing. If you don't sleep well, then you probably don't produce well. So guess what? You get better sleep so that you're more productive for your entire week. So you can go to 30evenings.com to check that out. This is not a sales thing, but it's 30evenings, 30evenings.com, and you can sign up for Sweet Dreams by doing that. It's a quarantine pricing, so it's literally like $400 off right now. So you can check into that. Now, here's the thing. The U of success was take care of you, self-care. Some ideas on that are one of the best things I ever did is I just looked at what are the things that it seems like we're running to Walgreens, Walmart, or Costco for all the time, like toilet paper, paper plates, deodorant, shaving cream, razor blades, Q-tips, whatever it may be, and make a list of those things. And then order enough for 6 months or a year right now. You are saving, not going to the store, buying deodorant repeatedly, or razor blades, or shaving cream, and guess what? I actually did that in January. I bought enough for our household for the entire year. Yes, our closets were a little bit full. of storage, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. And here's the thing. I didn't get into the rush for toilet paper. You know why? Because I already had it. Paper towels, paper plates, literally once you shampoo, conditioner, you start making the list of what you purchase on a regular basis, and then you purchase it all and don't have to worry about it for 6 months or a year. It is an extremely freeing thought. So that's just one example of how you can take care of you. The other thing is, you know what? Make sure you clean. Make sure your hygiene's high. Make sure you're always washing your hands. Lysol. I'm a big fan of the Lysol wipes, you know. And then the first C of success is clarity. And clarity is power. And I'll give you clarity right now.
All right. This is Gary Mesnick, Maximum One Realty.
Hey, Gary, how you doing, buddy? Yes.
I'm doing great. I just want to say to the group, I've probably spent the last year with Michael, and I've done event mastery several times. I'm in Catalyst now. I just completed 30 mornings yesterday, and I'm going to be in Sweet Dreams because I want to be successful, and I don't sleep that great. And I did Daily Dose. I made it to almost all of the 60 Daily Dose. And I just wanted to thank Michael for, doing all that stuff. I mean, the Daily Dose was so inspiring and had such great speakers, and I just have notes coming out of the yin yang. But I learned so much. I've been selling 50 years since I got out of college, and I learned so much that I didn't know about selling and being with people and relationships and all that good stuff. So I just want to say thank you, and if there's anybody on the line thinking about doing any of Michael's webinars or seminars, I recommend it heartily. So the question that I have is that I was wanting to know when Kevin O'Leary was going to come back, and Mr. Wonderful is going to come back on the I guess it's called the Weekly Dose now, because I find him probably of all the sharks probably one of the most interesting, and he doesn't really care what other people think. He seems like a really good guy, and seems like all of the people that he's worked with that are successful love him. So can you tell me a little bit about that? And I'd like to know I'm just curious how you hooked up with him as well.
Yeah. So interesting enough, it's Kevin O'Neill is the main character on Shark Tank now. Kevin Harrington was the original Shark Tank shark. And one of the Kevins had to go because people were getting them confused, which is interestingly enough, we have that right here, you know. So Kevin Harrington was literally the very first Shark Tank shark, and he was on the entire first season and part of the second season. But it's actually Kevin Harrington that we are going to have, and he is, I mean, this is a busy guy, right? He actually invented the infomercial. So you know all the stuff that's ever been. I mean, this is before QVC. Everything. He invented the infomercial, and he is actually going to be the keynote speaker for our Smart Restart Summit. So we could not get him on the schedule until July 10th, essentially. So I hope that helps. And how did I get the connection? You know what? It was a referral, an introduction from James Malinchak, who we had on the show. And, you know, James Malinchak is an ambassador. He is a, you know, huge connection for me. He connected me to Hal Elrod originally, you know, which ended up with the Miracle Morning for Real Estate Agents. I hired Hal, and one of his very first speaking engagements was a Gen. And look at Hal now. You know, he has taken over the world essentially for Miracle Morning and morning rituals. So it was a connection. It was an introduction. It was a referral from James Malinchak. So hopefully we can get Kevin O'Neill on down the road, Mr. Wonderful himself.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure whoever comes on your program will be somebody that I'll be more than interested in seeing. But I've got another question to ask too as well. I've had probably 2 or 3 accountability partners in the probably since the COVID thing started, and I'm having a hard time. And they're nice people, but I'm having a hard time keeping them interested in doing this with me. And I think that maybe it's that I'm not building enough value for them to want to keep on keeping on. And I really don't want them to become not friends anymore or business acquaintance. But what could you recommend as to the kind of person I should probably looking for to be an accountability partner that's going to stick with me?
Well, I think the first thing is to look at you, Gary, is like you said, right? You've been in our program for a year, and you have done Catalyst and are doing Catalyst. You have done 30 mornings. You have done Daily Dose, and you're doing Sweet Dreams. So,
correct.
So the first thing is you really need to be particular with who you make your account, who you have as your accountability partner. Angela Gribbons is one of the first people that popped to mind, and you can find her in the Generosity Generation group. Nicole Aldaz is somebody else. Jana Caudell might be tougher to connect with her, but you need people like you, Gary. Too often, you're the one giving the most value because you're the one willing to show up.
Right.
That's what happens is you got to find the people. And also, you just finished 30 mornings. You're probably going to be able, and Angela was in 30 mornings with you, right?
Yes.
So, so you've got a connection there. So that's I think that the big thing is you've got to find somebody as committed as yourself. And that's, it's not easy. It's not easy. No matter how good we do at the Generosity Generation and 7L system, no matter how good Richard and Douglas do with this conference call, I'm guessing that there's 90% of the people have fallen off. That would be my guess. And why did they fall off? Was it because the content wasn't good? No, I hope not. Was it because of my voice? Maybe. Maybe it was because I'm not funny. But the thing is because too many people are in this 7-minute or 12-minute world. If they're in something for 7 minutes and then they're out. You know who the super successful are? The ones who are committed. They're committed and they stay with it. The people like you, Gary. That's the truth. Is that if you sign up, show up. And I will tell you, I also know that we've gone 8 minutes over here, and that commitment kind of ends at noon Eastern for a lot of people, and I respect that they had to leave for that. But I think that the big thing here is that you've got to find somebody as committed as you are.
Michael, thank you. I realize that we're at the end of our hour. I do have one final question from Denny. If you can take one more. Denny, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And Denny tell us who you are.
I'm all in, right?
Denny, go ahead and ask a question. And Michael, I'll let you bring us home.
Thanks, and nice to meet you, Michael. I'm a big fan of the book and your system. My question, and you kind of alluded to it in this microwave success generation where it's always like, how long does this take to pay off, right? Someone starts a new habit, whether it's, their spiritual life, their fitness, or their business. And my question was like in this, microwave success society, if someone starts something new and they don't have an instant feedback, they tend to quit quickly, the 6-minute abs concept. So if someone were to implement the, 7L theory and start to, follow the system, like how long does it take before they get, you know, some feedback in the form of referrals, business, income?
So what's interesting is people think that it takes a long time to build a relationship to the point of referrals, and it doesn't. You could literally build a relationship today that produces referrals. The key is, are you willing to put in the energy to do that? Are you willing to give massive value first to that person? And I think the secret to the 7L system, and honestly my success, is that I have this extreme focus on one person at a time, and then I move on. You know, it's like I'm going to love on this person at the 1,000th% level, and yes, does that come on too strong sometimes? Yes, it is. But I would rather come on too strong with love than not. And so it's like, you know, somebody. I mean, I just did this with Kevin Harrington, right? It's like we had a conversation, and there was a way I could help him. I was all over it. Like I spent, 30 minutes making connections and sending him the right direction. And that's, so are you willing to think about people, and are you willing are you willing to have a meeting, follow up with a text message, follow up with an email, follow up with a voicemail, and follow up with a power note? Right? So right after this, and I'm not saying this necessarily to you, Denny, but I'm saying this as with every single meeting I did, I would follow up with a text message that says, thanks for having me. That was awesome. Great. Had a thought on this. And then I would send them an email and just say, hey, I want to just verify the email on your card, and I want you to know this is the best email for me. Looking forward to continuing to build this strong professional relationship. And then I would call and leave them a voicemail at their work or wherever, and I would just say, man, that was great. I really appreciated it. Thank you so much. And then I would write a handwritten note or a power note, and 3 days later they would get the power note. And I will tell you that in many cases, when I got the call after the power note, there would be a referral or an introduction or connection attached to that call. In 3 days, I went from stranger or a 0 on the relationship scale to a 10 on the relationship scale. And it cost me $3.50 and about 3 minutes and 50 seconds. So I love it. It's easier, it's simpler, and it's faster. People are craving relationships right now, especially people who are high character, high integrity, highly competent, and highly communicative. If you are willing to create a communication plan for a person, you will never want for referrals from that person. They will fill your bin. They will fill your pipeline. And the thing is people, A, didn't have the plan or the system, and B, they didn't want to extend the energy in an outgoing, unselfish way.
100% agree, and I know everybody's got to go, but I appreciate you putting a system and a process around this whole concept. Last, and I'll just leave with this, is I know you said you're doing a podcast. I'm a big advocate of podcasting for realtors on a hyper-local basis. Where does podcasting, blogging, social media, and all of that stuff fit within the constructs of 7L?
So I would say it fits in the events and seminars and the phone calls, right? So it fits a little bit in there as long as you're willing to make it interactive. But if you're not willing to make it interactive, then it is going to fit in the electronic communication zone, right? So most of it is going to be very informative, and you use it to a stepping stone to the top 3 or 4 levels, right? So it is still in the information zone. It's just a really good way to get the information out, and it becomes a great resource for people. But you got to realize, why do we do email? email is only the promise of a future phone call. That's all email is for. It is the promise of a future. Well, what is podcasting? Podcasting is only the promise of a future phone call or a future event. So, like Peter Pasternak should probably do a podcast, right? He could do a Planet Networking podcast and you know, that kind of thing. So,
Michael, it's almost, I don't believe in coincidence. It's hilarious that you mentioned that, but I'm actually Peter's partner in Real Estate Connections and helping him kind of transition this totally in-person event to a digital community. And he was literally at my office right before this call, and we are in the process of launching a Real Estate Connections podcast.
Well, there you go. Well, hopefully I can be a guest on that down the road. And the other part of it is
stole my thunder. That was my next question: is will you come on?
Yeah. So, Denny, I was just going to say, don't lose the live events. Right? Is you've got this wonderful combination? Is this Facebook group or a digital community? You've got the podcast, and then you've got these live events. For me, the live events are only going to get bigger and more powerful, you know, based on the other two aspects of this. So I love that you're doing a
100% agree.
But it's more powerful.
Yeah, 100% agree. We like Peter. I'm very much if I have the opportunity, I'd rather shake your hand to get face to face and do it over a coffee or in a group meeting if I can. So those aren't going anywhere, but we're going to try to make them bigger.
Well, you gave the greatest example ever. He was at your office an hour ago, right? I mean, why did he come to your office? Well, because that's how business is done, right? You had a one-on-one, and, you know, you wanted to get things done, so you had a one-on-one. So I think the bottom line is that you know, what we've discovered during the quarantine and the COVID time is that service is the answer. You know, it is sales, hardcore closing, selling to strangers, you know, fighting the do not call list. You know, now there's a do not knock list that is being promoted where you put your address in there and people can't knock on your door or be fined. You know, it's one of those where, you know, it's going to be easier for the people who do relationship sales to have sales. It's going to be much, much harder for people who do stranger sales.
Everybody, thank you very much. I appreciate your patience as we got to hear from Michael. I do think the old-fashioned conference calls forces you to focus on one sense, and that's your listening skills. And by listening a little more intensely, you can learn a lot more. So hope you got something out of this you can use. Thanks.
Michael, thanks again. We appreciate it. And everyone, thanks for being a part of our call today. And go out and have a great day. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Douglas. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michael. You too. Take care.